Hello guys, welcome to Redditor's Revenge. Here we post amazing revenge stories daily. And if you want more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and stay tuned with us. Moving to our today's first story, about how OP devastated her cheating husband's life, turning him into a jobless loser, and how his mistress became OP's slave. Now story. I have such a wonderful husband, I thought, as I left the house one morning. He had made the kids breakfast and dropped them off at school on his way to work, leaving me free to plan and enjoy a day to myself. That rarely happened, and I was going to make as much of the opportunity as I could. My name is Leanne Walters, and I'm 33 years old. I got married to my husband Mark right after college when we were 22, and now we have two adorable kids, a 6 and an 8-year-old. They're great kids, but looking after them all the time can get a bit annoying. This is why I was so excited about having some free time that day. I called my friend Sally and asked her if she was free to hang out. With the world still recovering from the pandemic, both of us had remote, online jobs, and so we could afford to take a little time off if we like. She laughed and said she was as eager to get out of her house as I was. We made plans to meet up at the mall in half an hour, and I got ready, putting on my new dress and some fancy makeup for a girls' day out. The mall we chose was near the kids' school, in fact, and I decided to pick them up after we were done. We decided to get some shopping done first, then our nails at the spa, and then a quick lunch before we went our separate ways. We window browsed for a while, not particularly liking anything we saw. On the second floor, Sally suddenly gasped and turned to me. "Look, isn't that Mark?" I looked in the direction that she was pointing and was surprised to see that the man she saw was indeed Mark. And he was holding hands with a woman. Wasn't she one of his co-workers? I thought I remembered seeing her at Mark's last year's office party. He was walking and laughing, his hand in hers. As I watched, she laid her head on his shoulders and he put his arm around her. A dozen or so shopping bags hung off their free arms. I suddenly felt dizzy and grabbed onto Sally for support. As they came closer, I cried out and turned myself away from them. They passed by without noticing us. After they had gone, Sally hugged and comforted me. She took me inside a cafe or something and made me sit down. I was too dazed to understand what was happening. My husband, my wonderful, loving husband, was cheating on me. My mind cleared for a second and I started crying. Big wails came out of me. Sally patted my shoulder and handed me tissues. "How dare you do something like this?" she said, getting angry on my behalf. "It might not be what it looks like," I said, as I tried to think about what had happened. I couldn't believe that Mark would do something like this. I got up suddenly, telling Sally that I needed to go home and think about what happened. She gave me a pitying look, but let me go and asked me to call her if I needed to. I got home with the plan already in place. I would do what most people do in cases like these and look at his behavior. What he was doing, when he was doing it, and yes, I would go through his phone once he came back home. That was the first thing on my agenda, and later in the evening, when the kids were watching television and my husband was dozing on the couch, I picked up his phone, which he had left in the kitchen. I had always known his password but had never needed it before. Keying it in, I opened the call logs. Scrolling down, I tried to find something unusual. There was a call that he had made last night, and it was over an hour long. I was convinced that it was that blonde, young hussy he had been calling. Going back a few days, I saw other calls that had taken place at odd times, at night, or when I wasn't around and Mark had had some free time. I was sure this had been going on for longer than that, but I was too mad to scroll upwards anymore. So, he was spending his time and money on some other woman while I slaved away at home with the kids. That would have to change, I thought angrily. Just to make sure that I was right and what I thought wasn't a mistake, I decided to conduct a little test. There was this girl in Mark's office that I knew, a younger intern named Samantha. She was a friendly girl, and I was closer to her than anyone else in Mark's office. I called her and explained the situation to her. I asked her who the girl was. After hearing my description, she said that the girl was probably Kathy, a low-level executive who had been working with Mark on a project recently. She promised to keep an eye on both of them and call me as soon as she saw something inappropriate. Over the next few days, I acted like everything was normal. I was angry and depressed all of the time, but I tried not to let it affect the kids. Even with Mark, I acted like I always had, even though inside, I was growling with anger and rage. I was waiting for Samantha to get me some solid evidence before I made my move. During this time, I talked to Sally and asked her advice on what to do next. She told me that Mark was an idiot who couldn't see what a wonderful wife and life he had, and was an idiot to throw it away to somebody who would leave him in a heartbeat. She told me that the best option for me would be to collect evidence of his cheating and then file for divorce and sue him for all his money. She told me to request call logs from his mobile company to show that he had been calling her for a while. She also said that she would testify that she him holding hands and being intimate with her at the mall. I told her that she was right and that I would get a lawyer as soon as possible to see what kind of assets and money he had. Samantha called me over the weekend and told me that had followed them over the week, and unfortunately, my assumptions were correct. Mark and Kathy had been secretly meeting in the break rooms in between meetings, and she said that she had also seen them kissing each other in the office supply room. They also routinely went out to lunch at the same time but were careful to avoid being seen together. I broke down over the phone when I heard this. Crying, I asked Samantha if she would be so kind as to take a few pictures of them together, preferably of them kissing, if she could manage it. I told her about my plan to sue him for cheating. She sympathized with me and agreed that it was what Mark deserved. She promised to get me some evidence that I could use in my case. I thought long and hard about what to do. I concluded that it would be best to record a call between the cheaters, to further strengthen the case. Both audio and video, picture evidence would go a long way in court. I decided to turn on the recorder app on my phone and leave it in our home office. That's where I suspected he took her calls. That night, I went to bed early and conveniently left my phone there. The next morning, I woke up, and as I had suspected, he had been on a call with her. I played back the recording, crying while I did so. It was more terrible than I had imagined. He had been cheating on me for about 10 months. During that time, he had made sure to play the loving husband so I wouldn't suspect anything. He had bought her dozens of expensive gifts during that time. The most shocking revelation was that he was planning on divorcing me soon, and then getting together with her. The witch, Kathy, had laughed and asked how he was planning on pulling that off. Laughing, Mark had replied that he intended to gaslight me and blame me for loving him enough. I had had enough. I couldn't even make it to the end of the recording. The entire thing had been devastating to hear. I immediately called my lawyer and requested him to secretly begin divorce proceedings. All I needed now was for Samantha to give me some proof, and I could tank Mark's career as well. A few days later, she sent me pictures of them canoodling in one of the office meeting rooms. She also called me and said that the most amazing thing had happened. Kathy had apparently been flirting with and seeing multiple men at work, not just Mark. Their boss had caught Kathy with someone else recently and she had just been fired. This was great news for me, and I rejoiced thinking about Mark finding out that the woman he had been cheating on me with had cheated on him too. Karma was a witch, and she had come for Mark. The same day, I received the divorce papers from the lawyer. Mark came home late that day, and he looked terrible. Something inside of me was rejoicing with satisfaction, and with great pleasure, I presented him with the divorce papers. I had already planned for the kids to spend the evening at their grandparents' place so I could do this in peace. He looked at the divorce papers. Shocked, he asked me why I was doing this. I gleefully told him that I knew he had been cheating on me for months and that I had all the evidence to prove in court that he was a lying, cheating bastard. I was also going to send all the pictures that Samantha had gotten me to everyone in the office so that everyone could see what a lowlife he was. He broke down, crying, and said that he was so sorry about what he had done. He begged me to forgive him and promised that he would do better and never do anything like that again. I almost wavered in my decision, and then I remembered all the anger and depression that I went through when I had first found out. I could never forgive him for the heartbreak that he had caused me. I'm not proud to say that I said some nasty, hurtful things to him. I told him that he was a terrible father who had chosen an office fling over his own family. I also told him that I would be filing for custody of the kids. He begged and cried, but I told him my decision was final and there was no changing it. The next day, I leaked his pictures with Kathy to all the people in his office. The very same day, he got called into HR and was fired due to violating the company's fraternization policy. A week later, I presented my case in court, and at the same time, asked for primary custody of the kids, saying that their father had shown weak moral character and was currently unemployed. While the case was still in court, I moved the kids and myself back to my parents' house. My parents were incredibly supportive of me during the whole ordeal. Roughly a month later, the court annulled our marriage and gave me primary custody of the kids. My ex-husband was now left with nothing except his sorry, miserable existence. The court had mandated weekly visits with the children, and I did my best to uphold that decision. I wanted my kids to still know and love their father, even if I didn't want anything to do with him anymore. The next few years were the most challenging of my life. I got another job, along with my online one, and enrolled in school again. I got my master's in my field of study and boosted my resume by attending seminars and webinars. It was a tough time for me, but I was resolved to come out of this bad phase stronger and more successful than ever. 3 years after my marriage ended, I got an amazing job offer in a neighboring state. I rushed to accept it. The pay was triple what I had made before, and the benefits were extraordinary too. I moved my little family of 3 to the city and got immersed in my job. During my second week at the company, I saw a familiar face. It was Kathy, the scheming girl who Mark had cheated on me with. I was in a very high position in the company and asked my assistant to get me details about her. My assistant soon found out that Kathy was a temp at the company, and that nobody wanted to give her a permanent job since she had defrauded a company that she had previously worked for. It must have happened in the 3 years since I had seen her last. Well, I thought, some people were just too dumb to learn their lessons. My assistant also told me that Kathy was in a mountain of debt due to the lawsuit her last company had filed against her. She had no choice but to keep working as a temporary office secretary here as nobody else would hire her. No wonder, since she had inappropriate behavior with staff and fraud on her resume. An evil idea came into my mind. All I had to do was get her assigned to my department and then I could make her life a living hell. And she wouldn't be able to do anything or leave since she had no way of getting a job anywhere else. I talked to the HR department and convinced them to have her transferred over. The look on her face was priceless when she saw who her new boss was. She recognized me instantly. I told her that I would make her my slave and that she would have to do everything I wanted. She was powerless to stop me. In the following weeks, I treated her terribly. I made her run small, insignificant errands for me all day till she was tired to exhaustion. I gave her small, menial tasks to do that took her hours and hours to do. I had her on call 24 hours a day and would often call her at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning to make her do something. If she could stay up that late talking to my husband for 10 months, they should have no trouble doing it for her job. The icing on the cake was when Mark came to visit his kids one weekend and I called Kathy over to drop off some files that I had purposely left at the office. They were embarrassed and ashamed when they saw each other. One of them was a jobless, washed-up loser, and the other was a corporate slave. Of the 3 of us, karma was definitely on my side. Life was great. Now, here is the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please let me know your opinion about this story in the comments section. And if you had a similar story or situation, you can share it and I would love to read them. So before leaving, please hit the like button and do subscribe to the channel to stay tuned with us for more awesome stories.